Well, hi, everybody. Thank you so much for signing on and joining us today. Today, we're going to be talking about how Fortune 500 company Hormel cut their contracting time by 75%. And before we go ahead and get started, a quick overview of what we're going to be talking about in today's discussion. So first, we'll spend a little bit of time talking through Hormel's evaluation and their implementation journey. And then we're going to dive into their use case and the results that they've seen since implementing Ironclad. And finally, we'll wrap with the fun part, which is the Q&A, all from you guys. But first, I am your host today, and my name is Aaliyah McFarlane. I've been with Ironclad for the past three and a half years, and I'm a senior customer success manager. So on a day-to-day basis, I'm working with customers like Sue and like maybe some of you who are calling in after they've stood up Ironclad. I am also the CSM for Sue here. So we do work together outside of this webinar, and we do know each other. But today I'm excited to just take a step back and reflect on all that she's accomplished with contracting and kind of talk through the process of how she got there. So with that, I would like to introduce Sue Olson, Senior Counsel at Hormel. Sue, feel free to give us a quick intro.
Sure. I am Senior Counsel at Hormel. I am kind of the head of the contracts team. It used to just be me, going back 21 years here at Hormel Foods in Austin, Minnesota. I see quite a few people from Minnesota dialing in. Hello. I started handling the contracts around 2004. Our process was pretty manual. And again, it was just me. Over time, we finally have gotten up to, we have 4 lawyers. 2 of them are just part-time with contracts, but there's 2 of us full-time. So we've got a bigger lawyer staff and even more paralegals and admins.
Amazing. We are so excited to have you here today. And for everybody in attendance, thanks so much for submitting the questions that you have during registration. We have received a lot of them and we're consolidating. And then at the end, we're going to help guide the conversation with your questions. So we will save time at the end for that Q&A. If you have any additional questions that come up throughout the session, you can also drop them in the Q&A tab. But with that, we're going to go ahead and get started. So Sue, first question for you. I want to kind of paint the scene pre-Ironclad days. Can you give us a picture of what your contract management process looked like before Ironclad and what all the challenges were?
It was absolutely completely manual, every step of it. Again, there was just me for a long time, and then there started to be a couple of more people. But when I started handling contracts back in 2004, I set up an Excel spreadsheet so I could keep track of where things were when a new file came in, when it went out to the business team, when it came back for a re-review. As that grew with our team having more paralegals and more attorneys, it was really difficult to make sure the spreadsheet stayed updated because the process was so manual. Since it was on a spreadsheet, it was really hard to get insights. It's hard to make sure that we had accurate information. If the business unit wanted to know where their contract was and somebody hadn't updated the spreadsheet, then we'd be giving them wrong information. It was just, manual stuff. Good times, right? And then internal audit in their review of everybody doing everything all the time came to the contracts team to do our audit. And they were like, what are you guys doing? Like, why are you not all doing the same thing? You all need to do the same thing. So we were tasked by internal audit to look for something that would get all of the transactional lawyers and teams with the same processes, with the same workflow design, with the same transparency, with the same way to save documents.
Got it. So it sounds a little bit chaotic, to say the least.
Yeah.
Okay, so when you finally got to the point where you're like, okay, we've had enough with this manual process, we really need to consider implementing a CLM. You had a lot of options, so you no doubt were evaluating a few different competitors. Can you talk us through what the biggest considerations for as you were going through that evaluation process to choose ultimately Ironclad?
Yeah, huge requirement for us was something that didn't need a lot of customization from the IT department. We basically wanted something that had some history behind it. It was an off-the-shelf product that already did what a legal team needed it to do, that it wasn't something being adapted that wasn't meant for what we're using. We also wanted to make sure that it was flexible, so that if something wasn't working right in a few months or a few years or next week, we could go in and change that ourselves without needing to have IT. And we really wanted a dashboard that was intuitive enough that it didn't need a lot of training, and it would likely increase user acceptance. And Ironclad was the win on all of those features.
Yeah, got it. So it sounds like visibility, transparency, and then just like general ease of use for those end users.
Right.
Okay. When I get this question a lot, both talking to prospects and working with customers, what did getting buy-in from your leadership look like? Because obviously CLM costs money, and there's a lot of people who need to give you the green light and sign off on moving forward with the CLM. So do you have any tips for getting buy-in from leadership?
Yes. One thing, if you work in-house, you tend to hear complaints. Why is it taking so long? Why is it taking so long? Where's my thing? While I don't appreciate the complaints, I also understand it. And when those complaints make it to leadership, it makes it a lot easier to tell leadership, hey, we need a tool to fix the thing, and we have something. So that was a piece of it. The other thing was getting buy-in from some of our internal clients, like in the sales group or the procurement group, that, look, we do so many contracts together. If we have a better way of working here in legal, it's going to help you too, because then you had somebody else that could also say, hey, leadership, let us do this thing.
Got it. And when I first met you, you were coming out of implementation, and I'll always remember that you described the implementation process as fun, which as a CSM, that's total music to my ears. And I know that throughout the implementation process, you got to work with two of our legal engineers, which is a ironclad term for an implementation manager. So you worked with two LEs during your workflow build out. What was your strategy for selecting what contract workflows you wanted to build first?
That is a great question. We knew that we needed to automate the NDA process as quickly as possible because of the large volume that NDAs can trigger and the speed by which NDAs need to get finished. When somebody realizes they need to share confidential information, they need to get that document protecting the information as quickly as possible. The other thing that we were looking at is like, okay, well, what things are a form that we're already working closely with the business unit that are super complicated, that include all the things that can make somebody else, the legal engineers, create the workflow design for us. So one of the things that I handle is some of the packers and stockyards contracts. If you're making bacon somewhere, you gotta buy the hog, and if you're making turkey products, you gotta be able to buy the turkeys. So we had sophisticated contracts with a lot of different variations. So I looked at two of the turkey contracts and was able to condense together like 7 different versions of one agreement with 13 possible addendums that went with it, all launching off the same workflow. So like, depending on what your question was that you answered in the launch form, paragraph 4 might say this or that, and paragraph 9 might be this or that. We kind of figured out what that would look like, and then said, okay, here's how this should flow. And then the Ironclad engineers did a fantastic job of taking that conceptual piece, working through the contracts, setting up the workflow design. And because we happened to pick a really difficult one, then we had already pieces of workflow design that we could look at, borrow, steal for all of the other workflow designs that we did later.
Got it. And I can tell by the way that you're talking about Workflow Designer, which for anyone who doesn't know what Workflow Designer is, it's the tool in Ironclad where you build those contract workflows yourself and you kind of customize what customize what that process looks like, as Sue was describing. So you have become a total workflow designer pro, Sue, because I know that you've built out most of the workflows yourself.
Yes.
Obviously, you worked with the LEs, but outside of the LEs, what other resources kind of came in handy as you were getting up to speed with building your own workflows?
So two pieces, other than being able to look at the ones that they already designed to figure out, how did they do this piece, and then just looking at it. And by the way, it's not coding. It's like actual real words on a screen with boxes. So it's super easy. But Ironclad Academy was really, really useful with bite-sized sections of here's how to do a thing. And they were actually really interesting for me. So I went all the way through to get my little badge of amazingness, whatever the badge is called. The other piece is there are some pre-built template examples that you can pull from. So there's a pre-built template example for an NDA already in Ironclad that you can just be like, well, I'm going to use this one to start, and then I'm going to customize it. And I used one of those when I was setting up our counterparty paperwork flow for the thousands of contracts we see each year that come in on somebody else's document, to be able to set up all of those pieces, because that was very different than generating a contract off of a launch form.
Yeah. We call that our workflow library. So if anyone has seen that in Ironclad, it's, as Sue pointed out, it's got all your templates. So it can really help you just not have to reinvent the wheel when you're starting to create a new workflow.
Yes.
So you put in all this work to build those workflows. And once they're feeling ready to go, you're ready to launch those and have those end users start using them for the first time. How did you get your end users to adopt Ironclad once you decided to publish those to your organization?
So the first hurdle was within the contracts team, within the legal department. And it was walking through like, okay, here's what we're doing now. Here's the steps we'll take instead. Instead of putting the information in the Excel spreadsheet, you're going to launch in this thing. The Excel spreadsheet goes away forever. And getting everyone used to that. But then when we started building workflows that work for specific departments where the business unit is beginning to launch things, then it was finding the person that you're working with in that other department that you can already tell is on board with doing something new that will shave off a ton of time for them. And then saying, okay, let me show you something I've been working on. And then a little quick demo of, a workflow for a different department. And they look at it and they're like, wait, what? I can answer questions and generate a contract and I don't have to wait 12 weeks. You'll look at it like that week. And they're like, sign me up. I'm in. So user adoption was surprisingly fast at the business unit level and frankly unexpected, where we have them clamoring to get an Ironclad license so that they can take advantage of working directly with legal within the app.
Yeah, I can imagine coming from Excel, that's probably a pretty easy sell with a way easier process that's half automated for them. So that's really cool to hear. So once they kind of dip their toes into Ironclad, they're getting the hang of things, you're getting feedback. What are some of the benefits that your end users are seeing that they're expressing to you?
The number one benefit for the end user perspective is faster turnaround times and visibility. So for the ones that have an Ironclad license, which is most of our procurement department, they can look at any time on their own dashboard and see exactly where it is. Like if they open it up and look in the activity feed and it shows that I'm editing the contract right that minute, they can tell in live time what's happening. Or they can look at it and go, oops, I sent it to them last week and they forgot, and it's actually their turn to work on it. So having a little bit of that transparency and visibility into the contracts from their own access on the dashboard has been great. Our turnaround time went from 12 weeks and sometimes a little more than that during our peak busy seasons of the year down to consistently 3 weeks. We've actually had a couple of complaints from some VPs that are signing things saying, can you slow this down? Because I haven't even had a chance to look at that yet. And you want me to sign it already? So that was kind of cool. We really like that. Another huge benefit is there's one place to look for everything. The document is in one place. The emails are in one place. You can see exactly where stuff is in one place. If somebody has to be gone, one of the other folks in our department can step in, open the activity feed and go, okay, this is where this is at, and then just work on it. And we never had that capability. We were passing around paper folders for years with the contracts actually in them. And you'd have to read through the whole paper folder and hope it was all there, where now it's all in chronological order in the activity feed. And it stays there with the signed contract because we've already experienced in the 1 year we've been live, having to go back and find some of those conversations that were happening in the emails.
Yeah. So with all that kind of increased visibility for your end users, I'm imagining that this makes your life a little bit easier because you're not getting these rogue Slack questions or emails asking what's going on with the contract, which
Yes.
leads me to my next question, which is super important. Let's talk about the personal benefits you've had since implementing Ironclad. I think you had mentioned something about more vacation time. I'm sure people want to hear about that.
I've been here at Hormel Foods a really long time. And it used to be when you went on vacation, like in the recent past, you had to be dragging your laptop with you and checking your phone all the time and hoping that a fire didn't happen while you were gone. With the contracts team having Ironclad and the ability to step in for each other, like I come back from vacation and I was just out for a week and a half in July and early August. I come back from vacation and I don't have any fires because somebody else handled them while I was gone. It's like, oh, this is really nice. This is cool. So that's one huge thing is like the time off. And the other thing is because I have more time available to be proactive, instead of just reactive, I can say, hey, I see that you've, sent us something that looks like this, like 6 times this year. I can make this easier for you. I can do a workflow design that will generate this and cut out a bunch of weeks. And, we aren't going to have to do these other manual steps. And, let me make your job easier. And people are like, wait, what? You can do that? And we're like, yeah, we can do that. And that's really cool because we went from being the department of no NO to the department of no KNOW. And I really like that. I like being able to help someone and not just, correct sentences all day long.
Yeah. So going from the no department to like the Department of Innovation, because you can now identify a tedious process and say, hey, I can cut this down or I can make this easier for you. That's so cool.
Exactly.
So you mentioned during our prep call that Hormel is making a company-wide effort to transform and modernize processes across other departments or just all departments. So how is the legal team keeping up with all of those cross-functional changes?
Everyone has been encouraged to take a step back and look at the way that we do things and why we're doing it that way. Is there something we should stop doing because this doesn't make sense? Is there something else that we have an opportunity to do that we haven't been doing? Just, looking at it in a not doing something the way we've always done it just because it's the way we've always done it. Transform and modernize is really a different way for us, every single one of us, to look at things differently. And implementing the Ironclad process at about the same time that this was happening as a company has really fit nicely because we are transforming and modernizing the way that we handle contractual workflows and some repetitive processes in a way that takes out a lot of manual steps and takes out a lot of stress.
Yeah, I hear you. This is one of my favorite questions and one that we usually get in the Q&A. Can you talk to us about maybe your top 1 or 2 most impactful features in Ironclad that you're currently using and you cannot live without?
The dashboard. The dashboard is really, really intuitive. And we looked at several different tools, and the other ones were like, there was so much stuff on the screen, you couldn't even tell what you're looking at. The dashboard's intuitive. It's customizable to the viewer. So what I'm looking at for the way I like to see my queue of stuff to do might be, well, is different than one of the other attorneys or one of the paralegals or our admin. So we can each have our own customization in the dashboard. So the dashboard is huge. The other big thing is our ability to immediately fix something if we see there's a problem. Like, oh, and our standards have gotten even higher than they were. So we'll look at the final document and be like, oh, there's 2 spaces between that word. There should only be 1 space in that word. And then you just go into Workflow Designer, remove the space in the edit, and then save and publish. And it's literally 45 seconds and you fixed it. And not having to call IT or spend a lot of time. And it's not hard because everything about it is intuitive. That is fantastic to be able to do that.
Couldn't agree more. Well, speaking of Workflow Designer, we've talked a lot about how you could use that to build contract workflows, but recognize that some people in the audience may not know what we're talking about. So in just a couple of seconds, we're going to queue up a short demo clip. It's just a minute or 2. So we're going to go ahead and tee that up for you guys.
Workflow Designer is our market-leading, no-code, self-service admin tool that lets administrators build, test, deploy, and update workflows on their own in a matter of minutes. You can start building a workflow by utilizing one of our 6 best-in-class templates from our library, or simply upload a Word document template and start tagging it with fields to get started. You can configure workflows to accept third-party paper uploads as an option. Some of the work has already been completed for us. At the top of the page, you'll notice the various steps an admin needs to configure before publishing this workflow. From defining the document or documents that belong in this workflow and the language within them, the data needed to launch this workflow and the form that will capture it, to specifying who will review, sign, and archive this workflow once it's executed, and a variety of other options. Every change to this workflow is automatically saved to the latest version, and admins can restore past versions if there was a mistake, or preview updates to the template without needing to publish them. To configure this sales agreement, Ironclad includes a no-code tagging UI that an admin user can use to add fields and conditions which dictate language in the document and downstream processes like approvals. These fields and conditions are all contained on the left panel. Tagging fields in a document is as simple as highlighting a bit of text, like agreement date, and selecting it from a drop-down of available fields, though you could also create a new field on the fly. For much more complex data, formula fields allow you to display involved calculations, including switch or substitute statements, conditional nesting, arithmetic, and other functions embedded within the field's logic.
And we're back. Thanks for watching, guys. So as you can see, Workflow Designer has a lot of functionality and a lot of customization. If that's something that you're interested in learning more about, just let us know in the chat and someone from Ironclad can follow up with you after this event. So now we get to the fun part, which everybody loves. Wanted to save the end section here for some live Q&A. We've got a lot of good questions coming in for Sue. So thank you for submitting, and we're also adding more. So feel free to continue submitting if any more pop up. All right, so first question for you, Sue. What was the time frame to fully implement CLM?
Oh, let's see. We signed the contract, made the decision in April of, I think it was towards the end of April 2023. By August 14th, 2023, we were live with the NDA workflow. So that was about, what is that, maybe 4 months, less than 4 months. And 2 weeks after NDAs went live, while we were still working on the turkey contracts, and I had developed the first counterparty paper workflow, me and one of the other attorneys said, let's just do it. Let's just change everything right now. And we did. So it was like August 30th that we went live with everything else. And then there was a little bit of resistance in the legal team as we were working through like how to do this instead of the way we were doing it before. But we had basically the entire contracts team on board by the end of September last year. So 4.5 months, 5 months.
And this is me adding a follow-on question to that. So now, given like the practice you've had in Workflow Designer, if you were going to spin up a new workflow, how long do you feel like that would take you now that you're past the implementation period?
Oh, a new workflow? Hour and a half to do one that I know, right? That actually generates a document. We have 52 active workflows right now. Most of them generate documents. I have 2 others that I just haven't had quite enough time to actually start them. But I need to do them, and I need to do them pretty quickly. So that's probably what I'll be working on tomorrow, which will bring us to 54 workflow designs. Even things as small as an amendment, because I mean, face it, in-house counsel is amending things all the time. And the thing that's always common to every amendment is the top of it. You know, we entered into a contract of such and such a date, and we're going to amend the things below. And then there's the, hey, everybody's signing this in a signature block. That's always there, right? So why redo that all the time? Why not make that amendment itself into its own workflow? Well, then once you're inside of an amendment, maybe, you know, you're always taking out section 1 and replacing it with a new section 1 because it's like the term paragraph, or maybe you're adding something, or maybe you're deleting a line. So our amendment workflows will auto-generate the top and the bottom, and then it spits out the various paragraphs of, you know, this section is being with replaced with this section. A new sentence is being added at the end of section whatever, you know, and then below. So it gives you some coaching of how to put your pieces into the amendment, which makes it super easy for the paralegals to draft. But anything that we can turn into a workflow in Ironclad is saving us time, because as soon as you're ready to send it for signature, you've already got signature fields in your thing, and you've already got the signer information right there, and it's click the button and it goes. And then when it's signed, it comes back. And you're like, well, you know, nobody's having to chase that anymore. It's become that fast on new workflow designs because it's frequently a similar process. So if I did a procurement workflow for buying packaging, I know that I can create a new one for buying ingredients by duplicating the workflow. So you just, in Workflow Designer, you just click duplicate, give it a new name, and then just start tweaking the questions that you need to tweak. And if it's generating a document, you can download and upload new versions of the document all the time and edit it. So it becomes very, very fast after you've done a couple of them, because you're always able to borrow stuff from the one you did before.
Yeah, I think it's always worth highlighting, like, implementation time doesn't depict like how it's always going to be with Ironclad, because as Sue's kind of painted a picture there, it's the initial investment, and then once you get a bit more comfortable and you're not having to reinvent the wheel, spinning up new processes or new workflows within less than 2 hours. Super impressive. So we've talked a lot about creating workflows using Workflow Designer. This next question is talking about migrating contracts into Ironclad. So thinking about legacy agreements that were completed outside of Ironclad. The question is, how did you manage migrating your contracts into Ironclad, and how long did that process take you?
We have not, at this juncture, migrated them all. We have them sitting on another repository, like the universe of stuff for the legal department is in another repository, and there's 67,000 documents in there. So we haven't pulled them all yet. But to the extent that we are pulling them, we're like if we're working on a contract with Acme Bird Feed Corporation, so that's a throwback to, Warner Brothers. We will then look in the other repository for everything we've ever done with Acme Bird Feed Corporation, and we'll move that in at the same time. We've got one person that just does all of this archiving in the back. It works pretty seamlessly. There's a parent-child relationship record field property that we just automatically put in every workflow design, because the person who does the archiving for us needs that. So what it does is it then links the various records together that you want to be able to find together. But at this juncture, we're just pulling them over as we're working on another piece of that widget and then getting things over.
Got it. And just kind of quick follow-up from feature perspective, we call our import feature Smart Import, and essentially it's using Ironclad's pre-trained AI to scan those imported agreements, those docx files, those PDF files that you're bringing into the Ironclad repository. It scans that document and then pulls out all of our out-of-the-box properties. So looking for things like the agreement date, expiration date, all of that key metadata. So that process is automated. Okay, so shifting gears a little bit, this next question is, what were some of the pain points your legal team went through with reviewing, and how did Ironclad help? So thinking about that negotiation process.
Oh my God. Where do I start? In the before times, we would get something back that you'd be on page 3 of 10 and you'd be like, they didn't redline all their changes, because I'm pretty sure we didn't agree to this last time. And then you'd pull the old one and you'd have this on your screen, you'd have that on your screen or in paper or however you're doing it. And you're going line by line and trying to figure stuff out and getting angrier and angrier at whoever it was that didn't track their changes properly. Now, I click a button that says compare docs. And I say, I want to compare the last 2, or I want to compare this one with 4 versions earlier in Ironclad. And it will just immediately make a red line for me showing what the differences are. The huge time saver for us is we're able to do that. And I do that on most of them that are coming back for a re-review. I will just double check to see if there's something else that was modified that didn't show up, because you could tell pretty darn quickly. And if there was, you can create a new red line based off of what you're looking at in the compare docs feature with one click. So that's been huge. And the amount of time it saves us in trusting that Ironclad is actually giving me the right information versus having to do this on 2 different documents that are many pages long has really been a huge time saver and a stress saver.
This is kind of a related question. Same, we're still talking about negotiation. So does your process have a lot of handoffs, and how do you manage those within Ironclad? Are there any handoffs to teams that do not work in Ironclad? And if so, how are those managed?
Yes. So I'll answer first for the ones that are in Ironclad. In Ironclad, the paralegals do the first level review. And then when they're done with it, they message us in the Ironclad app, which then triggers a notification to us. Us being the lawyers, that it's our turn to look at the thing and make additional changes or pass them on or whatever it is we're doing. If it's to somebody in the business unit that has an Ironclad license that we're working with on that contract, they already have visibility to the workflow. I will then message them in the workflow and say, hey, I just did this morning. Hey, Scott, this one's ready for you. There's a specific change in attachment 1 on the first page. Make sure you look at that. And then he then gets the notification and goes in there. If it's something super time sensitive, I might also send them a message in Teams with, yo, your turn to look at this. But that works really slick for people who have access to the dashboard. Now, if they don't have access to the dashboard, which is the vast majority of our business clients, we use the email documents button that's in the workflow. So up at the top, you've got the documents that you're actually working on. A workflow below that is the activity feed with all the stuff chronologically, newest stuff on top. So right under the workflow, there's an email documents option. You click email documents, and then it'll pop up a sample email, and you can make your sample email for that workflow design, whatever you want it to be. Ours is generally something like attached is the, and then record property, whatever the document is, or the property field that we want it to be. So it will automatically fill in like the name of the document. For your review, let us know if you need any changes, and then it auto-fills the person who's sending it. So if I'm sending the email, it will automatically show my name and my email address. If somebody else is sending it from the same workflow, it shows their name and email address, which is really nice because, again, it's removing steps, also taking out some errors. Every time you're going to manually type something, it's errors. But we'll use that and send it to the business unit. Hey, here's your thing. Please take a look at this. If this looks correct, I need you to forward the attachment, not my email, to the supplier or to the customer for their review and approval. Let them know I'm available to talk to their legal team directly if you need. Otherwise, get back to us. And that piece of the process of handing it off to the business unit to then finish negotiations is how we handled it before. So that part hasn't changed. And then there's one more variation, which is something we didn't really have the access to do before, because when they send in the email with here's my new contract that I need the legal team to review, we now have the email trail. So we're plugging in the names of the people they're working with on the other side. So certain kinds of contracts, like a negotiated purchase order terms and conditions with one of our suppliers, I will check that. And if I have the contact information for the other party, I will email them directly, copy our business unit client, and say, here's the draft addressing the changes you requested. I'm available to talk to your legal team. Please pass this on. And that cuts out a whole step in between and gets you to a finished product faster. So there's several different ways that you can work with that, even if somebody doesn't have an Ironclad license.
Got it. So this next question is kind of shifting gears towards the actual workflow submission process. And it says, Sue, do you input all of your information manually into the launch form, or do you have an in-house system that you link or map in order to autofill any of that launch form information?
We do not have one. I know that it works seamlessly with Salesforce, but legal doesn't use that. I believe our food service and retail do, but I'm not sure. But in the legal department, we're doing manual entry, but we also have pretty sophisticated contracts and templates where we have squished down the number of questions that need to be asked. So it'll be like, pricing terms, pick this or this, and they click the radio button, and then that answer shows up in the contract draft. So we've made it as fast as possible for whoever it is that's doing the launching, whether it's our administrative assistant in the legal team, or if it's the business unit, making selections to generate the contract that they need. But there are integrations, we just don't have any.
Yeah, and for anyone here who uses Salesforce, Ironclad does have an out-of-the-box integration with Salesforce. So it's absolutely possible if you have a workflow that you want to pull in specific data points from your account level, your opportunity, wherever in Salesforce, you can set that up in Ironclad so that the launch form is fully or at least partially completed, pulling in data from that external platform. So just a quick plug on that. A user question for you, Sue. Do you have designated users from the various teams that submit requests in Ironclad, or does anybody submit a request?
Within the procurement group, each one of them has an Ironclad user seat, and each one of them has access to launch the procurement contracts because there's so many variations of those. In other business units, like in live production, we have one person that does all of the launching for turkey contracts, but there's 3 of them that have user licenses. But there's just the one person that's just handling that. On the hog side, there's just one person that has a license and she launches them. So it kind of depends on what it is. We know there's another group that'll be coming on soon where it's like a group of 60 people and they will have 5 people designated to have access and do the launching on behalf of that group.
Got it. All right, let's see what else we got here. Oh, this is a good one, and I get asked this a lot. How do you decide what is a new workflow versus just a variation within an existing workflow?
That's a good question. So sometimes a new workflow will be one of the subsidiaries has a reason where they have to do things completely differently, even though they're also procurement. So I may split that into a different workflow because the group's management is how you can tell who's got access to things. So if everybody had access to 52 workflows, they would be a little overwhelmed and might start picking the wrong one. So if I only need this group of people to see these 3 workflow options, then I'm going to tailor that so that there's 3 that they see, but they don't see the other 10 that procurement sees. And procurement sees theirs, but they don't see the 3 that are specific to this group. So that's a lot of it, is who needs to see the thing and how much do you want to like eliminate the noise when they click on start workflow for what their options are. The other piece is how much variation does your document have? So even if you're creating 3 or 4 completely different documents, and I have a couple workflows like that, the questions are the same or very similar, then it's super easy to put those together into one. So like if we're generating like a lease template for whatever reason, those questions about, what county is it in, what state is it in, because that triggers some other questions. The questions are very similar, and there's conditional logic that is in the workflow designs is like the best thing ever, where, if you answered this question this way, then you will see a new set of questions, or you won't see these other questions. So being able to set up that conditional logic in your workflow to, again, pull out the noise and not have people answering things they don't need to answer for that particular document is super awesome and easy. Honestly, it's easy.
Okay. I think we have time for one more question. So last one for you, Sue. If multiple internal parties need to review the document and have extensive discussion and back and forth on it, is there a user-friendly space for this?
Ask me that again.
If multiple internal parties need to review the document and have extensive discussion and back and forth, is there a friendly user space for that?
Yes. So what I would do and have done with some of those is each one of them, because it's usually the same kinds of people that are doing this. So they each have a license in Ironclad, and they each get access to that workflow. Because when they have access to the workflow, they can send messages to each other within the app. They can comment on the document. They can see the document. They can, add or subtract things to the document. So that's a simple way to do it. Again, keeping it all in one place. So you're not constantly pulling things out like, oh, we're going to go to SharePoint and then we're going to put it back in. It's like, just leave it in there. Just leave it in there. And then everybody can work on it together. And when it's all in the same place, it's easier to know where all of it is.
Exactly.
I'm seeing a couple of questions about small legal teams. Don't be afraid of it. If there's something that's pretty routine. Like your NDAs usually look the same or usually have this other thing the same. That's a fast setup. If you only do counterparty paper where somebody else's contract is coming in, there's already a workflow template, and then it's just learning how to use it. So I would say, don't be afraid of it. Talk to Ironclad and ask them about that. They can, if you need help with the workflow design in the beginning, which is what we did for the beginning, you can get as much help or as little help as you need. And I think there's other vendors that actually will set things up for you too. But if you're a 1-person or 2-person show, it will really help. Oh my gosh, yes. I wish I would have had this a couple of years ago. In the before times.
The pre-Ironclad days. That was an inspirational one to end on. So thank you, Sue. We really appreciate the time that you put into this. And also everybody, thank you so much for joining. I hope you found this discussion impactful. If you're interested in learning more about Ironclad and how it can help your team, we're going to throw a link in the chat, and you can reach out to our team to get more information and have more discussions. So with that, thank you all. I hope everyone has an incredible day, and thank you so much for joining. We'll see you later. Bye, guys.